Yep. The NFL playoffs are here. It is the Awesemo NFL Tournament Strategy Show for the first week of the NFL playoffs, the wild card round. I'm here joined by Neil Orfield. As usual, show is sponsored by Jockmark. We've got Mike producing. Going with a little bit of a different format for this week because we've got two main slates as opposed to just being one main slate to talk about. So there are Millie Maker contests on DraftKings for both Saturday and Sunday. There's some pretty significant prize pools on FanDuel as well. So here's how we're going to go about this. We're going to talk about the Saturday slate, go position by position. Then we're going to talk about the Sunday slate and go position by position. That way, anybody who's watching after the fact, or if you just want to separate and say like, hey, I'm building my Saturday slate lineups, just want to listen to Saturday slate now, or just Sunday slate for Sunday. I just want to make it as easy as possible for everybody to find the information that they're looking for. If people are unhappy with this, then maybe we will readjust for next week and try to figure out what we're doing. But at least for this week, this is what we have decided to do. Neil, are you excited for NFL playoffs?
I am. Readjust is not what I thought you were going to say there. But yeah, I'm really excited for the playoffs. This is really an exciting time. I've been doing a lot of playoff best ball on underdogs. It's been a lot of fun. So I'm going to have a lot at stake in the playoffs. Really looking forward to it. How about you?
You know, it's funny because from a DFS standpoint, I prefer the regular season. I get everybody gets excited for NFL playoffs, but to me, I'd rather have a 13 game slate or a 12 game slate than a 2 game slate and a 3 game slate. I would really prefer actually if both FanDuel and DraftKings offered significant prize contests for the Saturday to Monday slate. But at the same time, we were talking about it before, and I understand people are going to play in all of the contests anyway. They might as well make more contests where they generate more rakes. So it is what it is, and we still have all these games to dive into. So starting with the Saturday slate and starting with the quarterback position, obviously not that many QBs to talk about. We've got 4. It's a 2-game slate. So Derek Carr, Joe Burrow, Josh Allen, Mac Jones. Who are you going to be building around for this weekend? And I mean, I assume that you and I, both being people who regularly play 150 lineups, we're going to be getting some exposure to everybody. So maybe the best way to talk about this is how do we want to allocate our exposures to the 4 QBs we have to choose from tomorrow?
Yeah, so it's a really tough one. So I think I am most likely going to be a little bit under the field on Josh Allen, a little bit over the field on, probably a lot over the field on Joe Burrow. Man, I'm still kind of decided. So I think Josh Allen's the only one that I'm expecting to be under the field on. I think I will be over the field on Joe Burrow, Derek Carr, and Mac Jones. But then I was going to say I was going to go way over the field on Joe Burrow, but then that's tough because you can't get over the field on the other 2 if I do that. So I think the only real stand that I'm ready to take is that I'm going to be under the field on Josh Allen. We have him projected for 34.9% ownership, but he's only optimal 28.4% of the time, top stack 30% of the time. And the game is only expected to be 24-20. It's not a super high scoring game. The Bengals Raiders game is slightly better there. So yeah, I think that Josh Allen is the guy that I'm going to be a little bit under the field on. Are you taking any major stands?
Yeah, I feel the exact same. I have builds that are made. Obviously, they're not final builds, but at least initial builds for tomorrow. And there's a couple of things to consider here. First of all, with this being the playoffs, we don't have access to the same value that we do in the regular season. Everybody plays. This isn't a situation where it's going to be like, oh my God, Joe Mixon's out. We need to play some backup running back tomorrow. That's not going to be the case. So it's kind of problematic that Josh Allen's so expensive on FanDuel and DraftKings. It's difficult to get up to his salary. Obviously, he has the highest upside of any quarterback on the slate. So I think what we're kind of fading here is just don't be like a 2 rushing touchdown game for Josh Allen. And I think we'll be okay as long as he doesn't totally go bonkers. The other thing, too, is the weather isn't expected to be great in the Buffalo-New England game. As a result, that game is a 44-point total as opposed to a 48.5-point total in the Cincinnati-Las Vegas game. So I'm going to lean much heavier towards Derek Carr and Joe Burrow than I'm going to for Josh Allen. Also, I really like the price point on Derek Carr individually. He's actually the QB I'm getting the most exposure to right now. High scoring game. He's only 5,800. I like what we could do with that extra salary. And what are you going to do with Mac Jones here? Because he's cheap, which is obviously a benefit when we're playing on the smaller slate, but he doesn't have the same upside as the other quarterbacks here. And we've seen what could happen with him in a bad weather game against Buffalo already this year, 3 pass attempts in that game. So how are you going to approach Mac Jones?
Yeah, so I don't think that there's necessarily a wrong approach to Mac Jones, and I haven't started building my lineups yet. So he is optimal 9.4% of the time in the boom bust tool at only 7.4% projected ownership. I think the only way I'm going to play Mac Jones is if he's the only quarterback that I can fit in a lineup with a lot of high upside plays. I assume that that's the reason that he is optimal 9.4% of the time, despite being a top stack only 6% of the time, because he is the cheapest quarterback. So he might allow you to get to a lot more high end plays. But otherwise, yeah, he just doesn't have the same upside of any of the other three. I'm not going to go crazy over the field, even if I do go over the field here, which I, as I'm saying, as I'm thinking about, I'm kind of hesitating because I'm like, I think I agree with you that I'd rather just go more over the field on Derek Carr and Joe Burrow rather than making sure I'm over the field on Mac Jones, just because, yeah, it's such a low scoring game. Bad weather. The Bills are number one in pass DVOA per per Football Outsiders. So yeah, it's a really tough spot to get to Mac Jones, and I think I'm expecting it to be a low-scoring game. I think that that's the way that Bill Belichick wants to try to win this game. Obviously, I'm not Bill Belichick. I can't really get in Bill Belichick's head. I don't know that anybody can get in Bill Belichick's head, but I would expect him to try to keep it kind of a low-scoring game, just to, the lower the scoring, the more likely they're able to keep up with the Bills. So yeah, I think that I'm probably going to be close to the field on Mac Jones, maybe a little bit over, but definitely not a lot over. I think I'm more interested in the Bengals Raiders game.
Yeah, and also to answer a question or a comment anyway that To Deck 20 said in YouTube chat that the weather looks fine in Buffalo, just a bit cold, more than a bit cold. The temperature is calling it 4 degrees is the expected temperature for game time up in Buffalo, and not real significant wind, 5 miles per hour, no snow. That was considered to be a chance earlier in the week. The really cold temperatures, though, if you do look at some of the research on weather in games, this does typically impact passing games. When you have temperatures that are this cold, 4 degrees, it is something, I forget the exact number, but it's something like once you get the temperature below this point, it's like a 10 to 15% reduction in the overall effectiveness of passing games. So it is something that I still think does impact the quarterbacks to some extent. And that's also part of the reason why the total in this game is 44. It's a pretty low total, and certainly lower than I think we would have seen had the game been played in, even 30 to 40 degree weather. Then I think we'd be looking at a total of like 47 points or so. So it's not something that I'm looking at as being a total make these quarterbacks you have to stay away from, but it impacts the game a little bit.
Yeah, and it's just two great defenses also. So yeah, I mean, obviously that you can assume generally that the total is going to reflect these things, how the weather impacts the game, how various factors impact the game. And here, I think that yeah, it appears that it is impacting the Vegas total. So I'm factored in a little bit just because the Vegas total is kind of low.
Yeah, and the other thing too is most projections you're going to look at, the Vegas total is baked into there. So it's not something like you have to downgrade players further. But still, I think it's an interesting enough talking point to make people understand, like, okay, this is why some of these quarterbacks might be projected lower, or why, if you look at our projections, why we might have Josh Allen projected to be less likely to be optimal than what his actual projected ownership is. It's partly because of that total being so low. Any other talking points you want to hit on here when it comes to these QBs?
No, I don't think so. Not from a QB standpoint.
All right, so let's move on over to the running backs now. And the running back position, pretty thin, which is to be expected on a 2-game slate. But as a result, there's a lot of concentrated ownership. We've got Joe Mixon projected to be in around 70% of lineups. Then we've got Josh Jacobs in about half the lineup. Same goes for Devin Singletary. So I'm going to start by asking about the 3 chalk running backs. Does this all seem sensible to you, or is there anybody you disagree on in terms of what their ownership is?
I think it seems sensible. Joe Mixon looks really solid in the boom bust tool, projected for 64.2% ownership, but optimal 73.9% of the time. I'm going to want to get to a lot of Joe Mixon. It's just a really nice spot. The Raiders are number 10 in rush DVOA, so that's not really a plus spot in terms of the matchup, but they're expected to put up a lot of points. I assume that Joe Mixon is going to be a big part of that. So yeah, I think just based on the boom bust tool and the high total, I'm probably going to be at or likely above the field on Joe Mixon. Josh Jacobs, I hesitate. I feel like I might not give Josh Jacobs enough credit in a game that they are expected to put up 22.25 points. That's, they're going to score some touchdowns, most likely. I don't love the 52% ownership. I would have expected it to come in a little bit lower than that. So I'm a little bit surprised to say that I might be at or above that projected ownership. My guess is that I'm not going to be too far above that 52% number. And it's a largely neutral play, and the boom bust will project for 52% ownership, 53.7% optimal. So I don't know which side of 52% I'll land on, but I don't think I'll be too far off it either way. And then Devin Singletary. Yeah, I mean, he seems to be the number one back there. He seems to have really taken over that backfield. Even though it's a low scoring game, I mean, he's also only 5,800. He's the cheapest of the chalk guys by far. So I don't really take issue with any of them. Do you have any major issue with any of those ownerships on those three?
The only thing I'll say is in the build I have right now, I'm a little bit overweight to the field on Joe Mixon, even with him being this popular. And I come in a little bit underweight on Josh Jacobs. I just don't view them as being they shouldn't be priced similarly, and they kind of are. So I look at it, if I have the ability to spend up for running back, I'm paying up for Mixon instead of Jacobs more often than not. And that's how it's breaking out when I'm just building lineups in Fantasy Cruncher. Mixon pops up much more frequently than Josh Jacobs. So that's something that with them being about similar in price, I'm going to end up with more Mixon than Jacobs. Going to lower my exposure to Jacobs. So of the three, it's Mixon 1 for me, Singletary 2, Jacobs 3. Something that makes Singletary look more favorable is, like you said, it's just the price point. He's so much cheaper than these other guys, and there isn't really another cheap running back I really like getting to. We'll talk about some of the contrarian plays in a second here. But by far, the three best plays at RB this week, it's Mixon, Jacobs, Singletary, and then it's kind of everybody else. So let's talk about some of the contrarian plays now. We've got Damien Harris picking up some ownership. Now, with that said, he is listed as questionable play right now. He's expected to be about 20% of lineups. Is there any of the contrarian running backs do you really like getting to this weekend?
Yeah, I mean, if you're considering Damien Harris a contrarian running back, which I suppose at 22.5% ownership on a 2-game slate, it's kind of contrarian. I have interest in Damien Harris for sure. Even at 6,400, we've just seen running backs go off against this Bills rush defense, and the Bills have a much better pass defense than rush defense. They're number 1 in pass DVOA, but number 11 in rush DVOA. And as I said earlier, I think that Bill Belichick will most likely want to keep the game low scoring, give them a better shot at just clawing their way to a victory. So I think that I like Damien Harris. I think that I'll be above that 22.5% number on Damien Harris, just because I think that they're going to be rushing it a lot. Obviously, Ramondre Stevenson kind of dampens the appeal a little bit, just because they do have somewhat of a split. And I think that I'll probably go to Ramondre Stevenson a little bit as well. He doesn't look great in the boom bust tool. He's projected for 9.4% ownership, but he's optimal 5% of the time. My guess is that I won't get to the 9.4% exposure in my lineups, but I think that I will actually be above the 5% optimal that we have for him, which isn't the usually I would want to go under that optimal number, but I think that he is cheap enough at 5,100 that, I mean, kind of depending on how my lineups shake out, but I think that I will want to get to some Ramondre Stevenson, especially with Damien Harris coming into the game questionable, makes it at least a little bit more likely that they're not going to give him as much of a workload, or that he could get hurt in games. So I think that I'll probably play some Ramondre Stevenson, and then even Brandon Bolden. He looks like a neutral play in the boom bust tool. Kind of surprises me that he's projected for 8.4% ownership, but he is optimal 7.8% of the time. My guess is that I will be close to that number. As far as I'm not as excited about any of the other.
Hard to be.
Yeah, I mean, you're looking at Samaje Perine, looks terrible in the boom bust tool. Apparently projected for 9.3% ownership, but he's optimal 0.8% of the time. I guess Jalen Richard would probably be next on my list if I was going to play one of these guys. Maybe I'll have some because he's the min for a running back at 4,000, projected for 7.6% ownership, but optimal 5.1% of the time. My guess is that that's not because he's expected to have a great game, but it's because he is the min, the cheapest viable running back. So similar to Mac Jones, he might just allow you to get to builds that have more stars in them. So maybe I'll get some Jalen Richard, and then the other option would be Zach Moss, who again just doesn't look great. Do we even know that it's going to be? They've been so weird with their running backs, where it's like they'll play Zach Moss one game and then he'll be inactive the next. I guess maybe we'll have Matt Breida. What do you
remember
do
when Breida was the guy? Remember all of a sudden it was because I remember I have a dynasty like I picked up Matt Breida. I was like, all right, I guess I just have the Bills starting running back now on my team all of a sudden, and then he was not playing snaps. So yeah, they've been really weird. It seems like Singletary is the guy now, and it's really hard for me to trust any other running back at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I feel the same way. The only reason that you could get to them is because this is a 2-game slate, and you kind of need to get weird to have different lineups. So if, track the news, track the inactives. If Matt Breida is inactive, then maybe I could get to some Zach Moss, or vice versa. If Zach Moss is inactive, which isn't out of question, then I might have some interest in Matt. I think I would have more interest in Matt Breida if Zach Moss is ruled out than the opposite. But yeah, if both of them are active, it's going to be kind of tough for me to get to either of them. Even on a 2-game slate, I don't think I'll be playing a ton.
Yeah, and then something else to talk about when it comes to the slate is we do have a really good deal going on over at Awesemo right now, because if you sign up to get an NFL Express weekly pass using the promo code SUPERWILD, one word, all capital letters, you get a $1 NFL Express weekly pass, which will get you access to basically everything you need to build lineups for this weekend. And actually, if you wait until the last minute, you try to do it right up to this weekend, that'll even carry you into getting to some of the information for next week as well. So this is $1. You get access to everything and help you build lineups for all of the showdown contests, which there's massive showdown contests as well. There's, I believe, milli makers on DK for Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. So you get access to all of that using the promo code SUPERWILD, just $1. And that is one word, all capital letters, SUPERWILD, SUPERWILD. Stop guessing, start winning. Join Awesemo Plus today. All right, let's head on over to the wide receivers. By the way, also some quick breaking news here. Clyde Edwards-Helaire officially ruled out for round 1 of the playoffs, and Tyreek Hill will play. So we'll be talking about the Sunday games right after we finish the Saturday games, but some news there that I wanted to make people aware of. Let's head on over to the wide receiver position now. And wide receiver, we've got at the top, Ja'Marr Chase. We've got Stefon Diggs. If you're paying up for one wide receiver this weekend, is it going to be Chase or Diggs?
It'll be Ja'Marr Chase. He is he has positive leverage in the boom bust tool. Stefon Diggs has negative leverage. We've talked about how just the game environments are going to be different. Ja'Marr Chase projects for 40.2% ownership, but he's optimal 42.1% of the time. Yeah, I think, and it's not really a strong stand that I'm taking. Stefon Diggs is slightly negative in the boom bust tool. He's projected for 37.2% ownership, 33.8% optimal, whereas Ja'Marr Chase, as I said, 40.2, 42.1. So Ja'Marr Chase slightly positive in the boom bust tool. Stefon Diggs slightly negative. It's not going to be a huge stand that I'm taking. My guess is that I get to 30% Diggs and 45% Chase, maybe even closer than that. But I think that if I were making one lineup, Ja'Marr Chase would be in it before Stefon Diggs. Do you have a different take?
No, it is the exact same for me. And it correlates to what we talked about when it came to quarterbacks. If I'm going to be underweight to Josh Allen in my build, it doesn't make sense to be overweight to his wide receivers and underweight to wide receivers from the Raiders-Bengals game. So I look at my build right now, and as it stands right now, once again, not final, but just so I kind of have an idea of where I think I would be at using some of our tools and just give me talking points for when we do this tournament show together. Right now, I have Diggs in about 25% of my lineups and Ja'Marr Chase around 45%. So there's a couple reasons for that. Number one, all the stuff we just said about Josh Allen, the cold weather, that's applicable here as well. And I just like stacking the Raiders-Bengals game with a higher total than the Bills-Patriots game. So I look at Ja'Marr Chase as a slightly better option. And the same thing goes as I move down my exposure list here. Hunter Renfrow. I prefer getting to Hunter Renfrow than guys like Gabriel Davis. And I get there in different price points, but Gabriel Davis picking up 17% ownership, that seems very high for me. And that's somebody who I'm going to be massively undercutting the field. So hopefully this isn't a Gabriel Davis touchdown game. But let's talk about the second tier of wide receivers now, where we've got, Hunter Renfrow, T. Higgins. T. Higgins is going to be really popular. He's expected to be in over 50% of lineups. That actually makes him the most popular projected wide receiver for the Saturday slate. What do you make of him picking up over 50% ownership?
Okay, so doing this a couple hours ago, I had him at 47.5% ownership. So apparently that's come up a little bit. I had him at 47.5 and then 51.5% optimal lineup. I really like that. I guess it depends on how high his ownership gets relative to his optimal lineup percentage. T. Higgins looks great. Hunter Renfrow also looks really good. If I had to pick one, I guess it would probably be Hunter Renfrow. If Higgins is getting over 50% ownership, I think I would go to Hunter Renfrow first. I have Hunter Renfrow, again, probably the numbers have changed already. 31.6% projected ownership, 32.8% optimal. I would like to get over that on Hunter Renfrow. I just think that he's the clear number one. I think 10 targets, 12 targets isn't out of the realm of possibility for Hunter Renfrow. They're going to have to be keeping up with the Bengals offense, which is pretty good. So I think that I would probably be over the field on Hunter Renfrow and maybe about even with the field on T. Higgins. I don't think I'll get too crazy there. Who's your preference there?
It's Hunter Renfrow just because, I mean, you're getting in almost half the ownership of T. Higgins, and there's so many more guys that the Bengals have to throw to. There's Jamar Chase. There's Tyler Boyd, who we'll talk about in a second as well. There's T. Higgins. Jamar Chase clearly is the most upside of the trio, but it has been pretty hard on a week-to-week basis to figure out who the Bengals' number one wide receiver is going to be from a fantasy standpoint, because there have been weeks where Jamar Chase hasn't been the big scorer and it's been T. Higgins. The thing is that we've seen over the last couple of weeks is Joe Burrow's found a way for everybody to go nuts. Burrow's gone crazy. Chase has gone crazy. Higgins has gone crazy. Boyd has gone crazy. In general, though, I don't think it's very likely that all three of them have massive games. So that's something that I'm going to be setting some rule to. I probably don't want more than two of them in the same lineup at any given time. But I think then you get Hunter Renfrow, makes sense for game stacks. And he's just coming with an ownership discount. And I know that he doesn't profile necessarily as a guy we would think of as being a massive high upside wide receiver. But at least and this is where it looks different on DraftKings as opposed to FanDuel. The 1 point PPR bonus is way different for Hunter Renfrow in terms of his outlook on DK compared to FanDuel, because a lot of it is volume based. You look at some of his recent games where we've seen, 9 targets, 14 targets, 10 targets. He doesn't need to have 8 catches for 150 yards or something crazy. If he's just a possession receiver who it's, a bunch of catches for 70, 80 yards, it's going to be good on DraftKings, a little more than it is on FanDuel. So Hunter Renfrow is certainly somebody that I like being overweight to the field on. What do you make of the 3 Bengals wide receivers and how popular all 3 of them are? I said I probably don't want to have all 3 of them in the same lineup. Do you feel similar to that? Are you okay with having Burrow in all 3 of them?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that back up because I was going to want to touch on that. I think because it's a 2-game slate, I'm not going to set that rule. So normally on a main slate, I would set a rule max 2. I think that on a 2-game slate, I'm going to allow it just because I don't think hand builders are going to do it, right? So I think in some ways, you're looking to get unique on a 2-game slate on top of obviously putting up the highest projected is the main goal. But I think that it is possible that they put up such a high score that all 3 of them get there. They actually did it a couple of weeks ago. They almost really did it. Tyler Boyd had a touchdown call back. Otherwise, all 3 of them would have had an incredible game together. I think 2 weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks ago. So I think that it is possible. And I think it's just a way to get unique. So I don't think that I will set that kind of rule on this one. Maybe I don't even know if it's at a max 3. I don't think that I would get to more than 3 of Bengals pass catchers anyway too often. But if I got to all 3 of them plus Uzoma, and then Uzoma is the optimal tight end with 4 fantasy points, that wouldn't be that shocking to me. And I would probably be the only one with that lineup. So I don't think that I will set that rule. I think that I'm not going to have a ton of lineups with all 3 of them or 4 pass catchers from the Bengals, but I don't think that I will set that rule.
All right, fair enough. And that's what a lot of the upper end, at least popular wide receivers are. Let's get to some of the cheaper wide receivers that are picking up ownership. Then we've got guys like Jacoby Myers, Gabriel Davis, Cole Beasley, Zay Jones, all guys that are expected to be fairly popular. Now, one thing that stands out about Zay Jones is he is at a price point on FanDuel and DraftKings where there just aren't that many viable pass catchers. So as a result, he ends up being super popular for that reason. How do you look at the cheap end of the pass catchers and who are the priorities to save money with at wideout?
Yeah, so I think the biggest priority for me on the cheaper end is probably Emmanuel Sanders, just because, so you brought up Gabriel Davis getting a ton of ownership. He's getting steamed because people think that he's taken over for Emmanuel Sanders. Alex talked about this on the Contrary show this morning, that Gabriel Davis has had this role most likely because Emmanuel Sanders has been out or was limited in one game. It's unclear if Gabriel Davis has carved out a bigger role from himself. Alex was kind of thinking that maybe he hasn't because he hasn't actually played that great in the time that Emmanuel Sanders has been out. So I think that with the ownership being 17% to Gabriel Davis and 8% to Emmanuel Sanders, I should check if this is still the case. We have Emmanuel Sanders at 5.7% projected ownership. Man, it's gotten even better. So yeah, I think Emmanuel Sanders is a clear priority there. Just to fade the field here, I think is this is a case where nobody really knows what's happened if Gabriel Davis has taken on more of a role. But if the ownership is assuming that Gabriel Davis has taken the role from Emmanuel Sanders, I'd rather take shots on Emmanuel Sanders. Are you getting there?
I love that. I think that's such good leverage. And on a 2-game slate, it's really hard to find situations where you're getting actual leverage because I don't want to play like Samaje Perine over Joe Mixon. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. This is one that does make sense. There's logic to what you said, and there's a cool ownership discount. We're getting Emmanuel Sanders single-digit ownership, less than a third of the ownership of Gabriel Davis. And this is one of those low-owned plays that I think could be a huge differentiation on a 2-game slate. So I do think that's one of my favorite tournament plays on the slate. And I'm happy you brought that up. That makes a whole lot of sense to me. And even as is in my current build, I actually do have more exposure to Emmanuel Sanders than I do to Gabriel Davis. But I think I'm going to make that even more so once we head into tomorrow and make it more of a priority to try to get Emmanuel Sanders in there. I think that is a really good way to get some leverage, because every snap that Emmanuel Sanders get, every route he runs, every target that goes to him, it's probably coming directly from Gabriel Davis.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we'll have to see what happens with the projected ownership. It might come up tomorrow. But you and I think, will be on again tomorrow, right? Deeper dive. So we'll be able to see where the numbers are at then. But for now, I think Emmanuel Sanders looks like a really strong play. And then after that, I think we talked about how we're kind of fading the quarterbacks in these games, but because the receivers are so cheap, I think they make a lot of sense as one-offs. I think Nelson Aguilar, Kendrick Bourne are some of our top leverage plays at the wide receiver position on this slate. Aguilar coming in at 8% ownership, but optimal 17.9% of the time. Bourne 8.4% projected ownership, but optimal 14.3% of the time. So they both look really good to me as well on the low end. I think that those three are probably, and I guess Zay Jones looks okay. He's flipped from being a pretty positive play to a negative leverage play with the ownership coming up from, he's up to 36.6% projected ownership now at 34.7% optimal. So he's a play that will work out a lot of time. I'm obviously going to have some Zay Jones, but I'm not going to be most likely over the field at 36.6%.
Yeah, he's going to be popular, and touched on before. It's just there are not that many cheap guys that really stand out. And, Cole Beasley is somewhat similar to Zay Jones, but Zay Jones is cheaper. We haven't projected for more fantasy points. And there's so much competition for targets in Buffalo. When you got Cole Beasley, Stephon Diggs, Gabriel Davis, Emmanuel Sanders, it's hard to know. Cole Beasley's had a bunch of games where he's just totally gone missing. And we've only seen him score over 10 fantasy points. Let's see, once since week 9. So not very many good fantasy games in there for Cole Beasley. So I do feel a little bit better about Zay Jones. Any other wide receivers you want to talk about here? I think we've kind of touched on everybody.
Yeah, I think we have to. I mean, Deshaun Jackson is somebody that we've been wanting to play. I guess Bryan Edwards, I have a little bit of interest in Bryan Edwards, projected for 9.8% ownership, but optimal 10.6% of the time. You could go there. Yeah, and then Deshaun Jackson just hasn't really carved out a role for himself there. So you could take a shot there, because obviously he could put up a 70-yard touchdown. He could get the 100-yard and a touchdown bonus, but it's a long shot, only optimal 3% of the time. So I'm not going to have a ton of Deshaun. Yeah, I think that covers it for me.
All right, let's head on over to the tight end position then. And there's one man who stands above the rest, and that is Darren Waller, who I think is pretty clearly the most talented tight end on the slate. To be honest, I'm a little surprised looking at the ownership that he isn't expected to just be the stone cold chalk at tight end, because he's expected to be about 50% of lineups, but then you still got Dawson Knox picking up nearly 30% ownership, right around 30% ownership for CJ Uzomah. Just considering the talent level of these tight ends, it seems to me that Darren Waller should far and away be the most popular. He is the most popular, but I don't think the gap is big enough. How do you look at the tight end position on Saturday?
Yeah, I agree with you. So he is projected to have the highest ownership of all of these tight ends, but he's also the only tight end on the Saturday slate with a positive leverage score in the boom bust tool. I think that you want to get over the field on Darren Waller, projected for 47.9% ownership, but optimal 51.4% of the time. So very slightly positive leverage. It's not a huge thing, but I think that I will be even over the field on that, because he's only 5,700. He's playing against the Bengals. It's a high scoring game. I assume he's going to come back into a role where he's going to get some targets. So yeah, I think Darren Waller is pretty clearly the top tight end. If you can get to him, you go to him every time, I think.
All right. So now we'll wrap up talking about the Saturday slate, and then we'll head on over to the Sunday slate, but we'll still do this bit, Neil, to tie some loose ends here. If you're making one tournament lineup for the Saturday slate and you're looking to make a stack, who would be the quarterback you go to and his pass catchers?
I think I will go to Joe Burrow with Jamar Chase and Tyler Boyd.
Give me Derek Carr to Hunter Renfrow and Darren Waller. I just like the salary savings we're getting from Derek Carr on a slate that's fairly difficult to save some money at. So we'll head on over to the Sunday slate now. But first, shout out to our sponsor, Jock Market, who is sponsoring the NFL Tournament Strategy Show and has sponsored the Tournament Strategy Show for most of the season this year. If you guys are unfamiliar or new to Jock Market, download the app, head on over to the site. They now have a desktop website. If you're making your first deposit, use the promo code Awesemo. You get up to a $50 bonus on your first deposit. But in addition, For the first time you play on Jock Market, they have a first market guarantee. So if you're playing an NFL or an NBA slate for the first time, they will refund your losses up to $100. So you deposit $50, you get a $50 deposit bonus, $100 to play with, and basically free rolling that first slate. So check all that out using the promo code Awesemo and check out Jock Market. Totally different way to play daily fantasy sports. Basically a stock market, but for athletes. There's an IPO period. You bid on the players and you can buy and sell them after the games have started. It's a fun, different way to approach DFS. All right, Neil, are you all set up for the Sunday slate now?
Yeah, I'm getting there. I had to reopen the boom bust tool because apparently all my numbers are off at this point. But I'm ready.
The other thing too is we just got the news that I mentioned before, which I think is a good time to bring up now in case anybody's just tuning in now, if they're listening after the fact to the Sunday slate. But the news that Neil and I just got as we were doing the Saturday portion of the show, no Clyde Edwards-Helaire this week. He's out. Darrell Williams will play, expecting a pretty significant workload for him. Tyreek Hill, who was massively popular, was like 90% owned on that showdown slate, week 18, played, what was it, like 7 snaps or something like that. He is going to be active and playing for wildcard weekend. No real concerns with me when it comes to Darrell Williams or Tyreek Hill. I think these guys are going to be healthy, good to go, but important injury news to talk about. Now let's start by talking about the QBs for this slate and a little bit more options. As opposed to 4, we've got 6 QBs to choose from. Mahomes, Jalen Hurts, Dak Prescott, Jimmy Garoppolo, Tom Brady, Ben Roethlisberger. Who is the priority play at QB for you on Sunday?
I think it's going to be Mahomes. I'm looking through it now with the updated ownership. So he's all of these plays in the boom bust tool are pretty neutral plays. Like they're all within 3% their ownership to their optimal lineup percentage. So Patrick Mahomes projected for 26.3% ownership, but optimal 26.6% of the time. That's essentially a neutral play. But then you look at his top stack odds, 36.7% on a 3-game slate. I generally look at the optimal lineup percentage more than the top stack odds. But when they're all this neutral of plays, I think that's going to be the tiebreaker for me. I think I'm going to be going to Mahomes more than the others.
Yeah, and I think something else to consider also is, Mahomes and Brady both being fairly expensive. Same goes for Dak Prescott. Of the 3 upper echelon QBs, it's clearly Mahomes for me. I understand there was a lot of struggles early in the season. Maybe this is just Chiefs bias because we've seen them come through so many times over the last few years. Mahomes has played well enough over the last stretch of games this season. He scored at least 20 fantasy points now in every single game since week 14. I'm willing to look past some of the woes from the early season. Also, the passing volume has been there in a big way. Pass attempts in recent games, 44, 35, 30, 47. I feel good about Patrick Mahomes being my favorite quarterback on Sunday. If this was a slate that spanned for the entire stretch of the first weekend of games, Mahomes would still be my number 1 guy to go to. So it's going to be Mahomes over everybody else. Obviously, there's massive upside in some of these other guys at the top end, but it's Mahomes number 1 for me. Number 2, though, is Jalen Hurts. He's kind of in a price range by himself, which it would just by itself, that makes something that is going to have me gravitate towards him. Because if you're building lineups and then you get into the quarterback position in Fantasy Cruncher, there's nobody priced around Jalen Hurts. And then he has all the rushing upside that no other quarterback offers for this weekend. I know Jalen Hurts has been up and down, but from a fantasy perspective, massive upside in him. And they're going to have to throw the ball a lot, presumably, to keep up with Tampa Bay. So Jalen Hurts and Patrick Mahomes, those are the 2 guys I view myself rostering most frequently. How do you feel about Hurts on Sunday?
Yeah, so the only thing that scares me a little bit is the windy conditions. It is supposed to be really windy in that game, and they're only expected to put up 18.5 points. So that scares me a little bit. But are we sure that doesn't mean that Jalen Hurts just rushes more? I mean, Jalen Hurts could just get a 100-yard rushing bonus in this game. That wouldn't be that shocking. They're going to need to be moving the ball. And I think that Hurts is probably maybe not. If Miles Sanders is expected to play, so he's probably their most dynamic rusher, but Hurts is close behind. It wouldn't be that shocking for Hurts to get 100 yards rushing in a game like this, in this kind of environment where they're gonna need to keep up, but it's gonna be tough in the windy conditions. So they're probably gonna have to get innovative. Yeah, I like Hurts. I would prefer if it weren't windy, I think, just because then I would expect them to pass more when they get behind and to try to keep up with the Buccaneers. But I still think that Hurts looks really good. Projected for 14.2% ownership, and he is optimal 15.9% of the time. So a slightly positive play there. Stacking is difficult. So top stack odds only 6.5%. I don't love that. But I think that you can run Hurts out there naked, especially in a 3-game slate, I think it makes a lot of sense. So I think that I'll get to some Hurts. I'll probably be a little bit over the field.
So here's something else I like doing with Jalen Hurts. I think there's a chance that Jalen Hurts outscores Tom Brady, even if the Buccaneers win pretty handily. I think there's just a blowout scenario where Jalen Hurts runs all over the field. I think Jalen Hurts, you could even run Jalen Hurts, I think, naked, but with like Leonard Fournette and then Mike Evans on the other side of the game. And I think that's a pretty interesting lineup construction that other people aren't going to be on, because I actually think that's the scenario where Jalen Hurts generates the most upside. It's not where well, obviously, if he throws for like 200, if like Dallas Goedert's 200 receiving yards, something ridiculous, that would be a lot of that would obviously be massive. But in terms of the scenario that I don't think people are going to be building lineups around, Jalen Hurts being without any of his pass catchers in just a situation where the Buccaneers win a game, let's say like 28-14, and Jalen Hurts rushes for over 100 yards, maybe a rushing touchdown in garbage time. I think that's a really high upside tournament lineup that kind of projects out well just when I'm building lineups that I don't think people are going to roster.
Yeah, I'm on the same page. I think that makes a lot of sense. I think people are going to probably fade the Eagles side. I don't think people are going to fade Tom Brady because of the winning conditions, just because he's Tom Brady. We've done it too many times betting against Tom Brady. We've learned our lesson at this point. So I think people are going to be going to Brady, but I think people will be a little bit afraid of going to Hurts with the winning conditions. And he is just cheap enough and he has the upside with his legs. Maybe he can throw it in the wind anyway. I mean, it's not like they're not going to throw the ball at all. Well, maybe. I guess the Patriots basically did that, but I would expect the Eagles are going to be throwing the ball some as well. So yeah, I like the idea of playing Hurts with no pass catchers, just running them out there naked and hoping they gets the 100-yard and a touchdown on the ground. It makes a lot of sense.
And then what do you make of some of these other quarterbacks? Because, and it's not to say we're calling Tom Brady or Dak Prescott not good plays. Just Patrick Mahomes, I think for both of us, is the priority for spending up for a quarterback. If we're dumpster diving, what do you make of guys like Garoppolo or Ben Roethlisberger for Sunday?
Yeah, so Ben Roethlisberger is only projected for 5.7% ownership. So that's nice, but then he's only optimal 3.3% of the time, and he's top stack 3.9% of the time. So I'll be going to some of his pass catchers because they're going to need to be throwing the ball. But even at 5,200, he just doesn't look that great. I think I would rather get to Jimmy Garoppolo. I think that's a game that is more likely to go off. The Cowboys are number 2 in pass DVOA, so I don't love that. But Jimmy Garoppolo projected for 13.4% ownership. He's optimal 15.3% of the time. Only top stack 8.8% of the time, but yeah, I think I'd be willing to go there just because he is the cheapest price tag, and 8.8 or 8.8% top stack odds is not, that low, and then 15.3% optimal. Yeah, I think that I'll be going to some Jimmy Garoppolo, probably more so than Ben Roethlisberger. Although I'm a little bit torn there just because Ben Roethlisberger is more sure to be playing from behind, or very more likely to be playing from behind. Chiefs defense has been pretty vulnerable, only 23rd in pass DVOA this year per Football Outsiders. So if he were any other quarterback, I think that I'd want to play the 5,200 quarterback against the Chiefs, but Roethlisberger has just been so bad this year that it's kind of hard for me to go there.
All right, let's head on over to the running backs now. But first, guys, do us a favor, like this video, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and also something else to point out. Neil and I are going to be back together on Saturday, back-to-back days with us doing shows. That's a good week for me. I get to do 2 shows with Neil.
Fun times.
We are going to be doing the deeper dive tomorrow for the Saturday football slate. So like this video, subscribe to the channel so you know when Neil and I are going to be doing that show. Now, heading on over to the running back position, and just to reiterate, the news that we got shortly before starting this part of the show, Clyde Edwards-Helaire out, Darrell Williams in. How does that impact how you view Darrell Williams for Saturday's slate? Because to me now, he looks like one of the best cheap options of the day.
Yeah. Hot take. CEHB note makes Darrell Williams a better play. I think I'm going to really like Darrell Williams. And the other piece of news that we haven't touched on is that Leonard Fournette was just, they said about half an hour before we started that he is the most questionable of the game time decisions in that game. So Leonard Fournette is the one that we're probably getting to a ton of. Now they're saying that he is the most questionable of the game time decisions. So that is going to throw a wrinkle in things as well. But just looking in a vacuum, yeah, Darrell Williams is going to look really interesting in that game. Let me see where the where the DVOA has them, because I felt like it was a good spot. Yeah, the Chiefs are the Steelers are number 27 in rush DVOA per Football Outsiders. So it's a really great rushing spot for Darrell Williams. And they are number 8 in pass DVOA. So if we think that they can slow down Mahomes at all, then I think they're going to go to the ground. I'm not too concerned about that, but Darrell Williams can also do it through the air a little bit. So yeah, I'm going to really like Darrell Williams in this spot, unless he gets steamed up to 60% ownership or something. I would expect that he's going to be a positive play tomorrow.
Yeah, and the other thing too is the Chiefs are favored by 13 points in this game. It's certainly a spot that's like that sets up for, all right, if the Chiefs are up by a couple touchdowns in the fourth quarter, good chance we see some extra run going to Darrell Williams. Let's talk about the Fournette situation. First, coach speak aside, because calling somebody very questionable, what does that even mean? Yeah. Right? Questionable as is like, hey, we don't know. Now it's like, we very much don't know what we're going to get from Leonard Fournette. I don't know if that means he's any more likely to play or sit. But let's talk about the couple different scenarios here. If he does play now, considering this injury designation and kind of the question marks surrounding him, does this make you at all concerned with his workload? We did see some pretty strange things, if you remember, from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in these rounds of the playoffs last year, where there was totally wonky ownership going on between Leonard Fournette and Ronald Jones, and nobody really knew how to roster these guys. But how are you going to be approaching Leonard Fournette heading into tomorrow? Because points per dollar, he would look like the best running back on the slate right now. But obviously the injury now throws a whole wrench into the situation.
Yeah, so it concerns me a little bit. So we have him projected for 57.9% ownership, but he's optimal 79.6% of the time, by far the highest positive leverage score of any running back on the Sunday slate. So normally I would just say, maybe I'll lock him in. Maybe I'm going to go well over the field. That's a spot where we can get leverage. I have some concerns here. They're not going to be rushing him in the fourth quarter. I think it makes it less likely they're going to be going to him in the fourth quarter if it is a blowout. If they're up 20 points, I don't think they're going to have Leonard Fournette out there just because they want to keep him fresh for the rest of the playoffs. Yeah, I have concerns. It's a hamstring injury. I'm not going to be playing above. If he gets to 57.9% ownership, I might be slightly above that, but I don't think that I'm going to be above the 79.6% optimal lineup rate like I normally would on most slates. I think that I would probably come in under that. And then in the lineups that I don't go to Leonard Fournette, I might take some shots on Keyshawn Vaughn in particular. I guess we'll have to see where the numbers come out coming in. I think it would be Keyshawn Vaughn would be the most likely, but we also have Gio Bernard and Le'Veon Bell coming in. So even if Leonard Fournette plays, I think I'm going to sprinkle in at least one of those guys, probably Keyshawn Vaughn, into some of my lineups, just because we know that even if he's playing, he is there's a possibility that he's limited and that they're going to give somebody else some run. And then there's also the possibility that he gets hurt mid-game. So on a 3-game slate, I think that would be my favorite spot to attack in terms of just finding somebody who is a dart throw, unlikely to do much, but I think in some lineups I would sprinkle in some Keyshawn Vaughn most likely.
Are you aware of the of my new GPP bit?
No, what's your new GPP bit?
All right, let me pull up So anyway, I agree with you on Keyshawn Vaughn. In fact, my favorite tournament play of the slate is Keyshawn Vaughn. It's way off the board. He's projected for less than 1% ownership, but still we have these injury concerns with Leonard Fournette. It looks like, at least as of now in the ownership projections, nobody's going to be getting to Keyshawn Vaughn. It's really hard to differentiate on really small slates. There's nobody I really looked at as being, like 1-2% owned for the Saturday slate that I thought was an excellent tournament play. Keyshawn Vaughn is somebody who I'm going to be well overweight to the field on. Favorite tournament play of the weekend. Deal with it, guys. Keyshawn Vaughn, we're playing him this weekend. All right, there we go.
First of all, I really enjoyed that bit, but I don't know where has this come up? Because I feel like I watch you on Live Before Lock almost every day. Maybe not every day. Maybe it came up on Live Before Lock and I just happened to miss that day, but I'm shocked that I've never seen this bit before.
I did it for the first time on Wednesday, and I've not had the opportunity to do it since, because it's something I have to be hosting in order to do it. So that is the deal with the tournament play of the weekend for me. Keyshawn Vaughn, assuming that nobody gets to him, it's going to be annoying now if we get to Sunday and he's like 20 or 30% owned, or something crazy happens with Fournette being out, because then the bit doesn't work. But I'm doing what I can when looking at the data 2 days in advance, and I love being on Keyshawn Vaughn. Not to the point where he's going to be in like 80% of my lineups, but if he's really going to be sub 1% owned, Keyshawn Vaughn with the injury situation with Leonard Fournette, that and Ronald Jones hasn't been practicing this week. So even more reason.
I think he's out already, Ronald Jones.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, he was officially ruled out. So yeah, just more reason for me to think that Keyshawn Vaughn could be getting some touches. And wouldn't be the first time that we've seen a Buccaneers running back totally vultured by Keyshawn Vaughn. Same thing happened to Ronald Jones a couple weeks ago.
So if we wanted to galaxy brain that, I guess we don't have much time left, but I just want to say, so if Keyshawn Vaughn does come up and gets to like 30% projected ownership, would you have any interest in them pivoting to a Le'Veon Bell or Gio Bernard?
Boy, now we're just going like chess, not checkers in terms of tournament plays. Where we're pivoting off the pivot play at that point. I know. I don't know that I'd go there. I also just don't think that's realistic because there's still going to be a lot. So here's the situation where if Fournette is ruled out and a lot of people are rostering Keyshawn Vaughn, then perhaps, but not right now. Maybe things will change this weekend, but I don't think so, especially because Naji Harris is on the slate, Zeke Elliott, Darrell Williams. There's a lot of other running backs to pull ownership. So I don't actually think that's going to be the scenario.
Yeah, I don't think so either. Okay.
All right. Let's go back to the high end of the running back position, because as good as Leonard Fournette has been this year, it's not like he's way more expensive. In fact, he's not even the most expensive running back on DraftKings this weekend. We've got guys at the top end of the pricing tier: Naji Harris, Zeke Elliott. How do you feel about these guys who are some of the more expensive RBs this weekend?
Yeah, so I think currently they look really, I think Naji looks great, projected for 26.5% ownership, but optimal 28.1% of the time. So he's a slight positive leverage play. I'd be happy to get to 35% Naji, because even in a game script where they get behind, he can do a lot through the air. They're not afraid to target Naji Harris. So yeah, I really like Naji Harris. Zeke always scares me a little bit, but he always looks better than I expect him to in the game. So maybe I should stop being afraid of playing Zeke. He's a slight negative leverage on this slate, projected for 28.9% ownership, but optimal 27.5% of the time. So don't love that. If I had to choose one, it would be Naji there. Would you do anything different?
It's Naji for me, especially because of the game script situation with the Pittsburgh Steelers, where if they're not going to be ahead in this game in all likelihood, but if they are, Naji Harris is getting touches. If they're down, they're just going to throw him the ball a bunch. We've seen him, pretty regularly be like 4 or 5 targets during the regular season. But don't forget, we've seen him get upwards of 19 targets in the game. That was clearly a massive outlier. But the point being is they have no problem throwing the ball a lot. And if there's any point in time where you're just, breaking case of emergency, everything you could possibly do in the playbook, now would be the time you just load up on Naji Harris in the passing game. We know that Juju Smith-Schuster, he had an outside shot at playing this week. He's officially been ruled out. So I think Naji Harris could get pretty significant work in the passing game, considering that the Steelers are 2 touchdown underdogs. So if I'm looking at Harris or Zeke as the pay up option, it is Harris over him for me. And then talking about Zeke, how do you view Tony Pollard as a potential pivot play off Elliott? Because we have seen Pollard put up some big games at times this year. Now, obviously, there's been a little bit of a drawback because he hasn't been quite as good ever since he had that foot injury. But do you view Tony Pollard as a reasonable pivot play off of Elliott?
Yeah, so people like me like going to Tony Pollard is the only issue there. So a lot of us are afraid of Ezekiel Elliott, and then we go to Tony Pollard instead because we all have this thought: Tony Pollard looks so much more electric than Zeke. Who knows? Maybe this is the game that he splits the carriers and he busts one off. But a lot of people are going there. So at 5,300, he's projected for 9.6% ownership. He's only optimal 6% of the time. So he's not somebody that I'm going to be well over the field on just because the field is getting there. So yeah, I think 9.6% ownership. My guess is that I'll be under 9.6% exposure. How do you feel about Pollard?
Yeah, I view Pollard as similarly to Keyshawn Vaughn. Here is the difference, though. Pollard's picking up ownership. Vaughn isn't. And also Leonard Fournette is way more popular than Zeke. So that's why I view Vaughn as being the better tournament play of the two. If Pollard wasn't popular, then I could see it. But there are people already getting there, at least relative to what I think his chances are of success in this spot. So less interest for me in Tony Pollard. If I'm really dumpster diving, Keyshawn Vaughn is the guy. Of the other running backs we have to choose from, Miles Sanders, Eli Mitchell, anybody else stand out to you?
Eli Mitchell, I'm going to have some interest in. He's just 100 more than Leonard Fournette. Fournette looks great in the tools, but you and I both have some concerns there. I think that'll lead me to a little bit more Mitchell. I think that I'll be over the field, projected for 29.5% ownership, but optimal 31.9% of the time. I think that I'll get over that 31.9% on Eli Mitchell. Yeah, there's nobody else that I am extremely interested in. Miles Sanders looks okay. They say he's going to play, but it's a tough matchup. He's 5,000. Yeah, there's nobody else that I really love that I want to take a huge stand on among these running backs. I just want to say one thing. Juju Smith-Schuster, are you sure that he's been ruled out? Because I was trying to verify that, and I think the latest that I've seen is that he is more likely to be playing today. It's quite possible that I'm just missing something, but that's the latest that I've seen.
The last report was that Juju Smith-Schuster is healthy enough to play in the wild card round, but is unlikely to be activated.
Okay. Yeah, that makes it a little bit. Now, Naji Harris, we just got them. Naji Harris questionable for round 1 of playoffs is the latest. Just got that news, that update.
He's gonna play.
I think
he's gonna play. I say for no reason other than I don't feel like having to.
I want him to play.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the Najee Harris elbow questionable play. Don't forget he had that elbow injury last week and ended up coming back into the game. Is it a concern minorly? I would be very, very surprised if he doesn't end up playing though.
Yeah, I think I would be pretty surprised too. It's a little bit of concern that they're still calling him questionable today, but it's not a huge concern. Teams don't really change those kind of designations too often unless they are sure. So yeah, I agree.
All right, let's hit on the wide receiver position. First, guys, we haven't done it yet. Do us a favor, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Let's run those likes up, get extra engagements. Helps keep Neil and I employed, which is always a nice thing. Lets us talk about sports on YouTube and make some money off it. Let's go to the wide receiver position. And at the high end, there's a lot of guys who are outstanding wideouts on Sunday. We've got Deebo Samuel, Tyreek Hill, Mike Evans, Deontay Johnson. Then we've got the Cowboys guys. I think we're going to put on in a tier of their own. But in terms of these other guys, Samuel, Hill, Evans, Deontay Johnson, who's the priority?
Man, so Mike Evans looks the best in the tools. The trouble is that wind kind of scares me a little bit, but I guess that's factored into the total. Yeah, it's probably Mike Evans. He looks the best by far. He's the only one with positive leverage of those guys in the boom bust tool. Projected for 24.8% ownership, but optimal 29.7% of the time. Don't have to worry about Antonio Brown anymore. We don't have to worry about Godwin anymore. He's the clear number 1. So yeah, I think it's probably Mike Evans. How about you?
For me, it's going to be Tyreek Hill. For one, I'm prioritizing Patrick Mahomes at QB. And with that in mind, it makes sense that I'm going to be prioritizing Tyreek Hill wide receiver. Now, with that said, he's going to be massively popular. So I think I'm just going to be around the field on Tyreek Hill. At least that's what I am in my current build right now. I have him in a little bit less than half my lineups. That's where the field is as well. I'm a little bit underweight to the field on Mike Evans right now, a little bit underweight to the field on Deebo Samuel. As talented as Deebo Samuel is, he is so difficult for me to project on a week-to-week basis because his production, you and I have talked about this during the season, it's so weird from wide receiver standpoint where it's like you get this slate where, oh, look, Deebo Samuel is super popular and he has 1 catch, but he carries the ball twice for 66 yards and 2 touchdowns. And it's stuff like that that's just really hard for me to buy into being sustainable. And then even last week, he caught 4 passes in a game that was a must-win game for the 49ers, 4 receptions for Deebo Samuel. He does have a rushing touchdown, but I just don't know how much could I bank on Deebo Samuel rushing for a touchdown to get there every week, because that's basically what he needs at his price point on FanDuel and DraftKings. If he does not rush or catch a touchdown, he's probably not going to get there. He's not getting a ton of targets. He's very reliant on this rushing projection. I don't totally buy into Deebo. It's going to be Tyreek Hill is the one I have the most exposure to.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, I've said it before. I don't need to know how they're going to get him the ball as long as I'm confident that they're going to get him the ball, or that he's going to be able to do something with the ball. So I think that I'll get to some Deebo, but I definitely understand your concerns. And he doesn't look great in the tools. He's a negative leverage play on this slate, so I don't think I'm going to be getting too. I'm going to be under the field most likely on Deebo Samuel as well. And yeah, I think so. So I said that I prioritize Mike Evans. That doesn't. So I'm going to be getting into more Tyreek Hill too. Mike Evans looks the best in terms of relative to his ownership, but that's because Tyreek Hill is projected for almost double the ownership of Mike Evans. I'm also going to be getting to more Tyreek Hill than Mike Evans.
Yeah, fair enough. But relative to ownership, I'm going to be about neutral to Tyreek Hill, but still, he's definitely the high-end guy that I'm going to end up with the most exposure to based on my current builds. Moving down into the mid-range where we've got the CeeDee Lamb, Amari Cooper, Devontae Smith, Brandon Ayuk tier of wide receivers. We've got Lamb projected for nearly 40% ownership, Cooper at 35%. Who stands out to you in the mid-range?
Yeah, so both the Dallas guys have negative leverage on this slate. I'm going to be getting to plenty of both of them anyway, but they're slight negative plays, so I'm not going to be getting too far over the field. Brandon Ayuk looks surprisingly good in the mid-range at 5,200. He has positive leverage, projected at 15.8% ownership, but optimal 19.4% of the time. I have interest there. I'll probably be getting to some Brandon Ayuk. Yeah, the mid-range is not a really strong range. Rashad Perriman, if you consider him mid-range at 4,600, we're expecting him to be the number 2 receiver, I think, on Tampa now. So project for 2.7% ownership, but optimal 8.4% of the time. He looks really great at 4,600. But yeah, in the upper 5,000 range, there's not anybody that looks too great. There's a lot of guys that I'm getting to some. I'll be getting to plenty of CeeDee Lamb and Amari Cooper. I'll probably get into more of them even than Brandon Ayuk, Rashad Perriman. But in terms of the positive leverage, Rashad Perriman is the top there. Brandon Ayuk number 2, and then the Dallas guys, just because their ownership is so much higher, they're slight negative leverage plays. But I still think that I'll be getting to probably over 30% of each of them.
Yeah, and then something else to point out about Rashad Perriman, who's projected for almost no ownership for this weekend slate. Cyril Grayson is out. Should that matter? No, but he's doubtful. So for all intents and purposes, not in our projections, I assume he's out. That doesn't seem like somebody who should matter, but there's no AB for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. There's no Chris Godwin. So you just get to a point where there has to be other guys that Tom Brady's going to throw the ball to outside of Mike Evans and Rob Gronkowski. I don't mind taking a shot on Rashad Perriman, who we know has big play potential. We've seen him win the game with a big touchdown catch in overtime once already this season. And you just get one big play to Rashad Perriman. You could really differentiate your lineup when he's only projected for 2% ownership. So is he the most confident play on the slate? No, but I do think he's a really strong GPP option. Anything else that stands out to you at the wide receiver position for Sunday that you want to bring up?
Yeah, so I like Quez Watkins. He's, again, just a play that's not getting a ton of ownership, but he's projected to be optimal 12.5% of the time at 9% ownership. He looks pretty good. Tyler Johnson, for the same reason as Rashad Perriman. The only reason that Rashad Perriman looks better in the tools is that Tyler Johnson is getting a lot more ownership, but he's still a positive leverage play, projected for 13.4% ownership, optimal 15.7% of the time. It sounds like Juju is not playing. If that changes come tomorrow, Juju will be the minimum. I'm going to be following the news there. If he hasn't already been completely ruled out, if he is ruled in and good to go, I'll obviously the whole field will be going there. So we'll have to follow the news there. But yeah, those are kind of the main pieces for me. Byron Pringle looks kind of good. I'll probably get to Byron Pringle. Yeah.
All right. So tight end time now, and tight end is loaded on Sunday because it's crazy. There was only a few tight ends who really wanted to play at all in the regular season and felt good about. Almost all of them are playing on Sunday. Travis Kelce, Rob Gronkowski, George Kittle, even some of the guys who are a little bit cheaper that at times were, good points per dollar value plays in the regular season. Dalton Schultz, Dallas Goedert, they're both on Sunday slate. How are you going to be divvying up your exposure on an unexpectedly loaded tight end position for a 3-game slate?
So I think that I will have similar ownership on all 3 of the top end guys. Travis Kelce, Rob Gronkowski, George Kittle, they all look really good. Kelce has the biggest negative leverage score, but as we've been saying, you and I both really like Patrick Mahomes on this slate, so that's probably going to lead us to more Travis Kelce than we would otherwise get. He's the only one of the 3 with the negative leverage score in the boom bust tool. Kelce projects for a 32% ownership, but only optimal 25% of the time. And the reason he's negative leverage is that Gronk, Kittle are both on the slate and could very easily outscore him. Gronk is really interesting to me. Project for 30% ownership, optimal 35% of the time. He is, I think, the number 2 pass catcher now on the Buccaneers with the other 2 big receivers out. So a lot of interest there. And then George Kittle's only 5,800. He seems to be better with Jimmy Garoppolo at quarterback. So I think he's in a really good spot. Project for 28.5% ownership, optimal 31.7% of the time. I'm going to have a fair amount of all of them. I think that I'm going to be going more to the high end at tight end to the cheaper guys than I usually do.
Yeah. And I mean, this Sunday slate is only 3 football games, and I think it has better tight end options than almost every single slate we've had in the regular season, like even the 13-game slates, because there were so many times where, Tampa Bay, either Gronk was out or they're playing a primetime game. The Chiefs played a bunch of primetime games, so Kelce wasn't on slates. George Kittle was out for a stretch of the season. There just wasn't that many times to pick from all 3 of them. Those are the priorities for me. Some Schultz and Goddard mixed in for sure. Schultz more so for game stack purposes. Goddard, if I'm making some Hurts stacks where I do feel like I need to get a run back option or a pass catching option, or else I think it's going to be something like 30-ish% of like Kelsey, Gronk, Kittle, and then just mixing and matching the other guys. I think paying up for tight end is where it makes most sense for Sunday. Now let's finish out the Sunday talk with this, Neil. If you're making one stack in a single entry GPP for Sunday, who is the QB you're going with and his pass catchers?
And so the question here is, do I leave Mahomes for you since we both love Mahomes? The answer is no. I'm going to take Patrick Mahomes and go with Tyreek Hill and Byron Pringle.
All right. So you went there. I'm going to say Jalen Hurts, but Leonard Fournette and Mike Evans on the other side. So none of the actual pass catchers for Tampa Bay. So none of the pass catchers for the Eagles against Tampa Bay, but a couple of Tampa Bay skill position players. They score a bunch of points, set up some garbage time for Jalen Hurts to just run against prevent defense in the fourth quarter. I think that's the game script that sets up the best for fantasy purposes for Jalen Hurts. That is going to do it for Neil and I today. We've got Saturday slates. We've got Sunday slates. Check out that promo code SUPERWILD. You get access to all of the tools we have for all of the showdown slates this weekend. Just $1. Really good access to the tools. Thank you to Jock Market for sponsoring the show. Like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Good luck this weekend.